Hello, listeners, and welcome to The World This Week. This week, we shall be doing a quick review of LIMUN, which is the London International Model United Nations. We will then be talking about the current European deal with Turkey, that is in discussions. And finally, to wrap it up, we will be discussing the changes in football away tickets. So, this week we have Sid, Carla, and Helena, and I will give it straight to Sid to talk about LIMUN. Sid.
Hey, everybody. Last 2 weeks, there are six delegates from University of Essex representing the university to go to London International Model United Nations. Me, Henrik, Luis, Helena, and Yasin from one of our friends who've been there, and we these are the things that we've learned during Lyman. Lyman is the biggest MUN conference in Europe, believe it or not, bigger than Euromon in Maastricht. Yet it's very simple in terms of facilities, logistics, and even the chair's topic. The thing that we've learned in Lyman, the major thing that we learned in Lyman, is the simplicity that they have. It's nothing to do with complicated things. It's nothing to do with impressing so many people. It's just simple yet effective to all the delegates so that the conference run smoothly and it can be get done easily for the just 3 days. And it's just that what makes it look complicated is because of the scale of Lyman. It's big, it's large, but it's actually very simple if we can scale it down. If we want to do Munich next 2 3 months or so, we should learn from the simplicity of Lyman. It can be big, but simple. So do Munich. We are small, but the best thing is we can just be simple and straightforward. And the other thing that we've learned in Lyman was networking and meeting new friends. Honestly, when we do networking and meeting new friends, we can even share stories about how they deal with their MUN, their university, and we can even invite them to go to Munich next time. So those are the two major things that I've learned in Lyman, the biggest Model United Nation conference in Europe. Helena, do you want to add?
I agree that simplicity is the key. And something I liked about Lyman, it's so big, so they are able to get in really interesting speakers from the UN. And there's also a lot of people from all over the world. You can network, you can get new friends. I liked the opening ceremony. One of the speakers were Mr. Ahmad Al Andawi, United Nations Secretary General's envoy on youth. He's not a Jordanian national. He's the youngest senior official in the UN history. And he was really encouraging youth to stand up. He is all about how we need to empower youth, both in the UN and in the world in general. And that was very inspiring listening to him. And they also had someone from human resources in the UN coming in, talking about careers in the UN. And I think that a lot of people coming to MUN, they were very inspired by that because maybe they have considered a career in international diplomacy or the United Nations even. So it was very informative hearing about all the different opportunities that were there, but also hearing how extremely difficult it is to get in there. But it was very inspiring.
The most difficult part of of applying to work in the UN is that he said there are around like 20k 20,000 people who applied for UN jobs. Only 20 of them at the end just get a job. It's very hard.
Actually, that is only for the young professional program.
Really.
So yeah, it's very very competitive.
Yeah.
You would think that you probably know someone to get in there. But other things about Lyman, there were a lot of different committees. Me myself were in World Health Organization, which was very, very interesting. From before, I didn't know that much about health policy. We were discussing antibiotic resistance as well as mental health. And we were able to pass 2 resolutions over the 3 days. We were one of the most effective committees in the entire conference. But I think the thing is about committees like World Health Organization, a lot of countries would agree on these topics. People want to fight antibiotic resistance. People want to improve health. So yeah, it was good to see that we could get together so many international young people and really cooperate on something like that, and seeing how everyone was so encouraged to work together and find solutions.
And yep, for me, I was in SOCUM, Social, Culture, and Humanitarian Committee. It's a very simple, it's a very simple committee, yet it's very fun to do. So it's a very good committee for newbies like me in the modern United Nation to get the hang out of it, the basic of MUN. So yeah, it's SOCUM and WHO, WTO, those kind of committees that we are in. All of those gave us the opportunity and gave us the lesson of being more confident in next coming MUN conference.
All right, guys. I mean, Elena, you said your committee was one of the most successful in passing resolutions, while I was in the Security Council, and we discussed the responsibility to protect for 3 days, and we passed nothing. So we will really like the actual Security Council. I mean, one of the best things about Model United Nations are the socials, and as you guys were saying, meeting people. So, were there any interesting characters you guys met? Any good friends you think you were going to stay in touch with?
um, Around like, is it 1,400 people in LIMUN, right?
That's correct.
Only 2 Malaysians in there, me and there's another Malaysian in my committee. We are the only 2 Malaysian, and she's very generous. She's very kind. I was thinking of inviting her and Halt Business School in London to go to Munich next time. Yeah.
I met a lot of people that were interested in going to more conferences in the UK, people that were from Belgium, from France. So you could talk about our conference to them and invite them here. But what was it was not surprising, but I'm used to talking about MUNers that do politics, that do international relations. But in World Health Organization, I met people who studied medicine, who studies biology, even dentistry. So that was very exciting and interesting to get to talk to people from other academic backgrounds than only politics, because they had different perspective on things.
Yeah.
Okay, so today,
I was going to ask, do you have any questions about going to a conference? As Carla, you haven't been to one, so.
well, I guess the main thing that interests me is whether it's better to go to let's say LIMUN, so to one of the conferences in the UK, or go somewhere like Brussels, or just in general outside of the UK, or is it better to start off with something that's kind of like in this environment, closer to.
Okay, so what I would say is, if you are thinking about going to a conference for the first time, there are conferences that are aimed at beginners. So Knotsman is an example of this. It's meant to be for people who aren't really sure of rules of procedure, or just getting into the swing of things, and it happens in early November. So it's a really good conference, quite big, well established, and people will go there who have never been. And it's a lot of fun. Then on the other side, you got Lyman, the big, all of them available. I mean, I know people also went to Wildman for their first MUN, and they fell in love. And it's all about what you wish to do with MUN itself. My personal experience, I would say, start at a smaller conference. It gives you more time to speak. It makes it a little bit more personal, and makes sure that you don't get lost in the crowd. That's my personal take on it. Helena, you want to add?
That sounds like a good idea, but for me personally, Lyman was my very first conference as well, and I was placed in an intermediate committee. I was a bit nervous about that because it was World Health Organization as well. It was topics that I weren't very familiar with, but it went really good, and I had a lot of time to speak, and I was engaging, and I wasn't the only one who was a newbie there. And also, I think that our weekly debates have been really good practice for us, because we've been trying to get through all the rules of procedure. We've been trying to write resolutions from before, so that was really helpful, because it wasn't that different in Lyman. It was more proper, of course, more organized, because we had a lot more time. But I felt very confident, and I had a lot of fun.
All
I have to say that our weekly debates are the best practice so far, because the Malaysian girl that I met during Lyman, she said, How did you do so good during the first day of Lyman?" And then you were the first timer in conference, and I said to her, "Oh, my university always do meetings and debates every week," and she said, "You know what? That's worth it." So our meeting has done very good job, ensuring our preparation for bigger conference.
Yeah, that's actually like pretty encouraging.
Yep.
Because, yeah, I mean, I'd love to go to a conference next year, to one of the bigger conferences, and just to know that the Immune Society here at Essex prepares you well for that is pretty encouraging.
Yeah, you got my back.
All right, Helena, some closing words.
It's worth mentioning that several of our delegates from Essex won awards. Louise won a diplomacy award, which is very highly regarded. Sid over here, you got a shout out
Yeah.
for doing a great job. And then you also have fun awards at Lyman. And Hanek, why don't you tell us about your fun awards?
Okay, just to quickly wrap up. So, I was in a co-delegation, so two of us, and we won Best Dressed. And you can go on Facebook and try and find these amazing photos of us. I won Best Tie, Best/Bow Tie, as well as Best Late Entrance, which I'm not repeating what happened. So, moving on, Carla, would you like to introduce us to our second topic, please?
Yeah, today I'll be talking about the current state of the refugee crisis and the EU-Turkey deal, which was basically going on in the last couple of days. So the EU and the Turkey pretty much closed the Balkan route to migrants, and it was done primarily to actually like kind of calm down the situation that's going on in Europe, because a string of nations across Europe have voiced their concerns about the security of their own states. So Serbia indicated that it would close the route, and Croatia and Slovenia followed through. And I suppose that this large-scale deportations of economic migrants are also a concern, because there's a mix between genuine refugees from Syria, and economic migrants that are coming to Europe. So it's trapping Syrian and other asylum seekers, genuine asylum seekers, who are pretty much desperate to head north to wealthier European countries, to Scandinavia, to Germany and such. And so I guess that how I see it is that it would kind of regulate the current irregular flow of migrants that's coming to Europe, but it would also leave a lot of people hanging at the borders of Turkey and Greece. And there's also been a plan to get help for Greece. So Brussels unveiled the plan to restore the functioning of Schengen zone by the end of the year, after a series of border closures. And the Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras demanded that thousands of refugees should be relocated to other member states, because there's just too much pressure on Greece currently. And yeah, I mean, I think at least this is better than not doing anything and just letting everything happen as it's been happening so far. So I think it's a step in the right direction, but then again, there's a lot of questions to be answered, and I think the plan, the future of this plan is pretty uncertain. What do you guys think of this?
The only thing to stop the refugee and migration crisis, I'll go for refugee first. The only way to stop refugee from overflowing into Europe is to solve the problem at its source. let's say Syria. So we need to solve the problem in Syria so that people will stop leave the country to go to somewhere else as refugee. The problem is that now in Syria, it's not anymore about fight over terror. It's not anymore about ousting Bashar Assad, but in Syria, it's now turned into a proxy war between the US and Russia. Yeah, it's something like that. I read it on the internet.
Yeah.
So, Carla, what do you think about the current plans with the negotiations with Turkey? So, currently the EU leaders are going to meet up, and what they're essentially doing is they're going to trade one illegal immigrant in Europe and send them to Turkey, and Turkey, in response, will get some money, and they will send someone from a camp, a UN camp, a refugee camp, who's been processed. And the whole idea is that, on paper, this is going to stop the people smugglers, and trying to curve that business. If people think, well, we're going to get sent back, but if we get processed properly, we'll be able to have our route into Europe. So, but the problem are Turkey have been asking to be brought back into negotiation tables to become a full EU member. They want no visa whatsoever for any Turkish citizens coming through, as well as as the European Union, will be providing funds to Turkey to take on these immigrants or refugees. So do you think this is a good plan, or do you think this is just a lot of hot talk?
I guess that at this point it's kind of hard to devise a really effective plan and a deal that would be simple enough, but also that would work. So yeah, I think that this exchange program, I'm kind of skeptical about it, to be honest. But we'll see what happens. Like, nothing happens overnight. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions that remain to be answered. Like, how many people would be exchanged? When would it start? And yeah, I guess we'll get some answers after the EU summit. But still, I think it's not going to be an easy task to implement this plan.
So how long more this refugee crisis, stays on world news? How long, people keep on going to be refugee?
I guess as long as the crisis in Syria remains, the refugee crisis will also remain a current topic in Europe.
Oh.
Well, I was going to say, in general, we're always, unfortunately, going to have refugees because the world is full of conflict. But it will dwindle down. And I think that when it comes to the case of Syria, we will probably have a integration process within the EU. And it's going to be a hot topic, especially here in the UK press, with the referendum coming up. And I'm pretty sure that our campaign will talk about this potential deal with Turkey, saying we can't trust them. Mm-hmm. Or, look, we're going to have more people coming in. And imagine if Turkey has no visa into Europe, then as an EU member, we're going to have to accept Turkish immigrants and it's going to remain definitely on the news while we live here in the UK for the foreseeable future, at least until 23rd of June.
Well, while we're talking about refugee crisis in Europe, and maybe it's going to calm down, maybe it's not going to be a hot topic anymore, we find ways to deal with it. I think it's important to remember that all the displaced persons in the region that are still in the region, conflict regions, because even though we don't experience this extreme flow anymore, if that were to kind of calm down, maybe it's not our problem anymore, we think. But still, there are millions of people who are still refugees in their own countries, in neighboring countries, and we can't forget about them just because it's not our problem anymore, if you could say that. Because it's still our problem, even though we don't have these people coming in over our borders. We still have to make an effort and help them where they are.
All right. Thank you, Helena. Carla, do you have any closing remarks, or should we move on?
Oh, let's just move on. Yeah.
All right. So with that, we're going to move on to our final topic. So I'm just going to read this out. So this is news from earlier today. So England's top flight football clubs have agreed to cap the price for away fans at £30 for the next 3 seasons, according to the Premier League. And this is out of a response of the Football Supporters Federation, where they said 20 is plenty as they campaign to try and lower prices. And this is off the basis that the Premier League is now earning an estimated £8.3 billion from its new television deals, and there's no need to increase ticket prices for the fans, and that English football is based on its away day support. Now, while we could talk about English football as much as we can, I mean, I would love that. I think what's more interesting and more a general topic is the power of activism and how fans or people in general can try and persuade groups to or institutions that are quite big and quite powerful to change. And I'm going to just leave out some questions here. Maybe, do you think there are any activisms that you think need to be changed? I mean, one big one earlier, a couple of years ago, well, more than a couple of years now, was the Wall Street protests, where people in New York were going to Wall Street complaining about the banks. There's always a constant ones happening here. We have the university fees happening. I don't think they're going to have much of a difference, but I'm sure they will be of some interest. So does anyone here would like to talk about some activism they were part of, or something that they think could be changed?
I guess this comes as a surprise to me because, to be honest, I haven't heard of a lot of cases where fans would actually change something financially in terms of activities they like, and especially not making them cheaper. It's usually the fans that change the materials or the topics or the subjects of certain things, like let's say their favorite films, or well, not exactly films, but the TV series. Like, I'm sure you have heard of the term fan service. But in terms of actually lowering the prices for something, this is actually, I would say that this is quite remarkable, especially for football, because football is like the most popular sport on earth.
I would say about activism. Anthony King had delivered a very wonderful lecture last year about civil society and its effect towards democracy. When Hannik, kind of connect the agenda about, reducing the price cap onto £30, it shows that the power of the people can really shook and change something. And to apply that, I'm going to choose Thailand right now. How does the government change from red shirt rally into yellow shirt rally, and then it interchangeable? The government in Thailand interchange with how people responded towards the government. So it's something big. Civil society activism is something big in Asia. But I don't know what's going on with the referendum for university fees. What's your comment on that, Hannik?
Actually, Thailand's a great example. I mean, when I went to Thailand, there were protests on the streets, and parts of the city were closed off. And they weren't there for a week; they were there for months. And are they still there now? Or?
They're still now. The military took over at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, and so you can see clear change. I mean, talking about the power of change, I think the problem with the student referendums, or the ones and having protests about changing the fees, is that unlike the football fans who have real power, so when the football fans, they can leave the stadiums, they can happily leave, they can just say we're not going to pay. However, when it comes to a public service like universities, then you're not going to have a sudden walkout of students for an entire year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the fact. People are still going to go to university. Some people are just will just feel apathy towards it, uninterested. Whether or not they should be is a different matter, but there will be students like that. And there'll be plenty of students from abroad coming over. And so universities and the government will just be able to ignore it. They'll just ride the wave 3-4 days. Then it's over. It will pass on the national press. And you've lost 3 to 4 days of paying fees for your university. I mean, I do believe that the university pay at the price that is set and the current structure of the deal is not exactly the best deal, and I would prefer it to be lowered, but it's not exactly the worst deal on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem about campaigning about rising the fees and so on is that people are complaining about the fact that GTAs aren't being paid much,
Mhm.
lecturers aren't being
Yeah.
paid as much. So how are you going to pay them as much? This money has to come from somewhere, so
Mm-hmm.
that's where the fee rises come in. So if you want higher pay for your lecturers or you want new equipment, you're going to have to pay for it. Someone's going to have to pay for it.
Yeah.
And so they're arguing the government has to pay for it, but that's really unlikely under a conservative government.
Yeah, so thank you, Henrik, for the clarification.
All right. We don't have much else to say, so I will leave there. So thank you for listening. Also, we've had our elections at the society, and so there have been some wholesale changes. So I'll just quickly say congratulations to Carl and Sid here.
Yeah, thank you.
And the results have been posted on the Facebook page as far as I'm aware, but we'll see. Otherwise, we hope you have a good week. And are there any thoughts for the week?
No.
No thoughts for the week. All right, we'll sort that out next time. However, have a wonderful day and see you next week. Goodbye.